2, 1. Make sure. Here we go. We are live. Nice. Okay, everyone, welcome to Wolf Crypto. Welcome to the Bitcoin Mining Roundtable, first edition, doing it on stream. Really excited. This is actually Adrian's idea. So shout out Adrian. He'll be joining us soon. Can't wait to get him on the stream. Saw him talking with it's leading me right now. I can't remember who it was. Him and Gabriel went on and did a podcast with some company that I don't know why I can't remember. And I was like, oh shoot, like the streams are so cool. I love doing them. So we're gonna pretty much do the same style, same structures, everything. Maybe we'll pull up some charts and stuff, but we're gonna dive into our thoughts on the Bitcoin mining market, thoughts on it being a Bitcoin proxy, if those days are just not here anymore. Like what can we expect now that we've trickled into we've never been here territory of $107,000 Bitcoin. I think at this moment 106, but people are pretty comfortable and we're just hanging out here with a $100,000 Bitcoin. So interesting place to be. Let me throw it over to Sebastian first, and then we can kind of get into the conversation. But curious on what you're kind of seeing in the market, how you think Bitcoin proxies and Bitcoin miners are going to go into the conversation. Are they going to remain a Bitcoin proxy? Or are we just waiting for a certain indicator to go off before they really take off? Or like, why are we seeing such a lag?
Yeah, Kate. So thanks for having me on, and thanks for everybody else joining as well. I mean, what am I seeing here with the miners? And miners, for the most part, are still a proxy. They're a little disconnected right now. At least some of them are. The other ones are, I mean, we saw Cypher being up 20-some% today. We saw Wolf being up, was it 14-16% on the day, and then it came back down as Bitcoin's coming down in price as well. So they're still proxies, but some of the ones that we thought were going to be running have not run yet. And that could be a good thing for them. And could mean that they could actually do really well going into the next 6 to 9 months, where some of these other guys that have run up already quite tremendously, nicely, might lag a little bit more, depending on where Bitcoin is and things like that, or if they don't have the contracts for the HPCI, like they've been talking that they do have for that. So we'll see, but I'm still really bullish on this space.
Definitely. We got bullish friends on your protocol. Bullish on AI. Yeah, I wonder on this panel who's the most bullish on the AI sector in this world. Who do you think it would be? I feel like if Adrian was here, I maybe have to give it to him, but who do you think, who would it be? I see Arceris smiling with a big old smile down there.
Well, so I don't know how bullish I am on AI in the market, vis-a-vis, trading it, but I'm very bullish on AI in my own life and using it. It's become a very, very nice tool. But as to capitalizing on it, I don't know. That's not a sector I paid too much attention to, even though I am a miner. My mining setup is my company is not set up to get into HPC and AI at all. So
definitely. Matt, what are you thinking, man? What kind of things are you seeing?
Well, I look at the miners because I care about Bitcoin, the underlying, and although I don't invest directly in the publicly traded miners, they are among the most educated group when it comes to what's happening from atoms to electrons in the Bitcoin space. And I think that we could all sense that there's a changing in the tides with the new administration that's coming in. And I think that we're moving collectively into a real Satoshi accumulation kind of era where vertically integrating these miners into some kind of I don't want to go full hash force. It's way too early in the space to go national security with it. But I think that as we announce the strategic reserve and then make a day one executive order related to establishing it and getting it operating, it will kick off secondary actions with Russia and China and others. So at that point, then the miners become very, very, very interesting. So I wouldn't be investing in them today on the speculative basis that at some point in the future, Donald Trump's going to write a pen that says the government owns the miners now. But I think that we're heading in a direction where the miners are going to become more and more important for the future of, for the future of the ecosystem. So that's why I'm interested in them. They're just a proxy with a lot of information, and they also represent a very important function, which is securing the network itself.
Yeah, Macro, why don't you jump in? Do you have any comments on this?
No, I think really for me, the one thing that's been interesting is since I've been actually following the miners more closely this time than I have in the past, is some of them have gone up pretty substantially, especially today. Even I was watching, I had notifications now on my phone, so I get notifications when the various stock prices are running. And it's funny to me to see some of them run and then others not. And, I don't dig deeply into the operations of each different miner. I'm much more interested in like the broad scale kind of themes of what's happening. But it seems to me like, at least from an investment standpoint, people are picking and choosing maybe the management teams, maybe certain strategies. I don't know. It's just interesting. Like I can't really make heads or tails of it, of why one rips and the other doesn't. Maybe it's just because I'm not in the weeds enough on them, but I've seen some people, even in like the mining mafia group. I'm a member of that, the community
Shout
here
out.
on X, and you know, you see people talk about it. They're like, "Oh yeah, this one's gonna rip," and then it just stays flat, and then something else will go up 20%, and it's like, oof, you know. So, and then I don't know. I see also people talking about playing options and stuff, but the premiums on most of them are so high. I'm like, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So, yeah, I bought a bunch of them, you know, in November, and I'm just going to kind of hold through the cycle and figure out. I don't know. I'll probably exit at some point, but it's been interesting so far to see, you know, some of them rip and some of them not. And I don't claim to have any idea of exactly what's going on or why. But I do think, you know, in the future, if some of them, I don't even know if you would necessarily have them be doing both Bitcoin mining and the high power compute themselves, so much as maybe partnering with one of those entities that does the high power compute, and then you just say, hey, I'd like to co-locate with you and I'll be here to do load balancing stuff. I don't know, it just feels to me like the amount of power usage that's going towards Bitcoin mining versus what some of these large high power compute data centers are using, it's an order of magnitude different. And so the miners become interesting to me on the margin from an operational standpoint. So that's kind of what I'm curious if stuff like that's going to happen, because the sheer scale of some of these data centers that are getting built, I mean, I'm driving by them on a regular basis. It's honestly insane. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of acres just getting clear cut and leveled flat for a building, right? It's just it's some of the largest physical infrastructure I've ever seen. So anyways.
And HPC, even though HPC and Bitcoin mining could sit in similar shells and they can consume electrons and turn them into things that are useful, they have vastly different cooling setups. They're also, with HPC, it's all about interconnect and it's distributed matrix multiplication happening across all these different tensors. And with Bitcoin mining, it's just a bunch of individual rigs that are just running the race. So
And it's
very, very different systems for sure.
and
I'm
very different
curious.
power consumption.
Have you guys seen or looked into any of the stuff I've seen or heard, at least on X? There's I don't know if it was Bitfarms or if it was somebody else that's working on basically something that's larger than like the S9, the S9s, the S19s, the S21s. They have a certain size, right? But if you look at any HPC, you've got large server racks, and then the cooling for those becomes a lot more efficient because you're not trying to run either a bunch of small lines for water cooling or having just a bunch of air cooler, you know, heat sinks basically. I'm curious if you guys that are maybe more on the operational side, maybe Arceris, have you looked into any of this stuff? Do you think there's anything there that could be interesting? Like if certain companies get their hands on that hardware first, maybe it makes their operations more efficient, which then leads to better uptimes or something like that?
Well, so the on the water cooling side, the it's WhatsMiner and MicroBT that's building out the standard 2U rack mount style Bitcoin miners rather than the shoebox style, and those slot into data center style water cooling setups. So you've got the full on rack mount, and then you just plug in the sides. Now they still have a whole complicated power supply system. But that may I'm not entirely sure because I don't have any of those in my possession. But I know that those are designed for standard data center use rather than the ant miners, which are still even their water cooled ones are still the shoebox style. With all the little all the little water pipes coming out of the front. So I would think that the Watts miners are gonna start coming ahead on that. Even though the problem with the Watts miners is that they are not the most. I mean, they're Mack trucks. They're not Ferraris. They are not the highest efficiency machines out there. But that said, I prefer Watts miners because in air cooling anyway, they don't care. They're honey badgers. They just will keep going.
Mm.
And Hut 8 actually recently partnered with Bitmain to do those 2U or 4U rack mount ASIC miners as well. They're going to be water cooled. So they're working on that also. So that's going to be kind of interesting to see how they do going forward. That shouldn't be up and running until I think middle of next year. From what I understand, they're building out the data centers for that to house those basically.
I'm really curious on this, and please stop me if I go too deep down this rabbit hole. But this is literally what I do for a living. So I do water treatment consulting for power plants, right? So I help them make their water treatment run as efficiently as possible. That is specifically what I do. So on the water cooling side of things, I've looked at some of the like manufacturer specs for some of these various water cooled setups that are coming out, and their water specs specifically to me are way too broad. And I think there's going to be operational issues with the parameters of the water. So pH, conductivity, alkalinity. I won't go too deep, but the point is like I'm looking at anywhere from 30 to 50 parameters for water in power plant cooling systems to maintain everything, to make sure that it doesn't cause them operational downtime, right? And so if you just basically say, hey, yeah, make sure the water's wet and the pH is 7 to 9, you're going to have problems within probably 2 to 3 months, maybe 6 months if you're lucky. And it can be bad enough to shut an operation down. And I just haven't seen anybody talk about it, but maybe I just haven't been talking to the right people on the operational side of things. And I'm really curious if maybe Arceris, you've seen or heard anything, or maybe they just haven't been deployed enough yet. Because I think if one company knows how to manage their water properly and one doesn't, the one that knows how to manage their water properly is going to win, right?
Yeah.
Because the other one's going to spend too much time fighting, bacterial slime issues and corrosion and all kinds of fun stuff. So
I think you're. I think this is a case of test in production. They're not they switched over to a water cooling system, and they don't really have a lot of experience with it. And it's like, okay, we shoved the water through it. We designed the engineering and mechanics of how the water moves through to move the heat away, but the practical aspects of making sure the water has the right pH, making sure that the mineral content is low,
yeah,
all of that. And so I have experience with that on the from a water cooling of water source heat pumps in a large hospitality environment. And you have a closed loop or semi-closed loop system that's got steel pipes, so you have to keep the pH at a certain level so that the pipes don't corrode, but and you have to keep it treated with chemicals, because any add-in water is going to introduce chlorine and fluoride and all these other things, so you have to get those down. And of course the machines are gonna leach into it, so you have to have a whole bunch of equipment to make sure that water stays as pure and conductive as possible, while also then having heat exchangers for the makeup water that gets evaporated in the evaporative cooling side. So that was a learning experience for me, because in my case, if the water went bad, I'd have to comp somebody a room in the hotel, not my tens of thousands of dollars of ASICs are now not working. And
yeah,
so I think it's really a test in production kind of thing. The same way that we saw with when they brought in the S17 and the XPs and things like that, where not everything was precisely right, and they just shipped them, and we'll see.
yeah. No, I'm really curious. I'd love to talk to somebody that's actually running them and just know, hey, are you at least following this stuff? And if not,
I think you should look at Marathon. I was reading a while ago about some of the work that they've been doing. Like obviously Riot and a few of the other ones are developing ASICs and their own capacity to, develop R&D and in-house, essentially if science and technology are really accelerating each other at faster and faster rates, wouldn't it be really smart to put an R&D plant inside your Bitcoin mining company so that you always have that cutting edge technology, at least fitting into your strategy, if not into all of your rigs that you're running? But anyway, you mentioned Arceris fluoride. Marathon has this like fluoridated cooling system that they just debuted, and it's got cooling condensers at the top of the water rig, and then they pump extra fluoride into the water, and then when it gets up closer to the top with the condensers, it gets cold, and then it basically gets liquid again, falls back down, gets closer to the heat where the action is, turns into a gas, and so it creates a circulatory environment. And this is supposed to help with naturally, without using any additional energy, just using chemistry to kind of circulate the heat inside the environment. So Marathon's one you should look at, because I think they've got some expertise in house when it comes to water.
Yeah, that's their two-phase system, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So that's a closed loop system that doesn't use water or anything like that. It's a special chemical that goes into it that actually boils at a much lower temperature.
It's like a refrigerant then, probably, because that's what a lot of refrigerants do. They'll have a boiling temperature and 130 degrees or something like that, and lets you do stuff like that. That's interesting.
Dielectric fluid or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And Marathon strikes me, if you wanted to connect one of the big publicly traded miners with the R&D, Marathon, because of their history, strikes me as the one to back, because a lot of people may know this, but maybe not. But Marathon, prior to getting to Bitcoin mining, was what some people might have referred to as a patent troll. They were basically a non-operator, or a non-practicing entity, and they built themselves a big portfolio of patents. Now they pivoted into mining, but because of that background, I would think that their R&D team would be a little bit more substantial than some of the other pure mining plays.
I would also maybe look in BitDeer is another one. They're doing their own ASIC build outs. They're working with what is it, Team SC, Taiwanese chip conductor, to build them out. So they're working really hard on that. That might be another one.
Could you actually expand on BitDeer? It was literally where I was going to go next. So Sebastian, maybe just keep going on BitDeer. This one had creeped up basically after Gabriel pointed it out, which unfortunately we couldn't get him on today. But Gabriel brought up BitDeer a long time ago. I had never heard of it. And then it just seems like over the last few months, it's like flown to the top. It's like in the top 5, I think now, at least on a few sites that I've seen for the largest miners by market cap. Right now, I'm on companiesmarketcap.com. I don't know if that's accurate, but it's number 4, right after Core Scientific. So Sebastian, could you give a little bit of intel if you do know for BitDeer?
Yeah, so BitDeer has a lot of stuff in the pipeline. A lot of their growth is going to be happening in 2025, which I'm surprised a little bit by their run right now, because the growth is not until like the second half of 2025 into 2026. Yeah. So I was a little bit surprised by that, but okay, yeah, they're doing their ASICs. The ASICs are looking pretty good. The efficiencies on those are getting better. They got a roadmap that's supposed to get them down to like 5 joules per terahash at the end of the roadmap that they have right now, which is just outrageous from where we are right now. It's basically 3x, 4x reduction in power consumption on those things. So if they can do that, I think that's possibly why the stock is running. They've also done a convertible note that I think is helping with some people maybe possibly short the stock less. You got also then institutions buying into it like crazy here recently. That's also helping the stock there. And I think it's more institution driven than it is actually retail driven. But I mean, they got, what do they have? Like over 2 gigawatts of power pipeline going into 2026, 2027. So they have a lot going for them right now. And yeah, they're just front running a little bit right now.
Does anyone know a resource that demonstrates the different miners' access to power, maybe their cost of power, or is this one of those things that we kind of have to sticky tape together by looking through filings?
Yeah, we have to kind of sticky tape it. I have some data on that. Others have other data on it as well. It just all depends on what you're looking for.
Definitely. I'm curious on what you guys think about BitDeer. If you guys have done any kind of deep research or have any commentary on BitDeer or not. If yes, down to stay on it. If not, totally down to move on as well.
No, I think I'm in the same boat as you. I had never even heard of them until maybe a couple months ago. And then all of a sudden I started hearing the name a bit, and now, hey, we're here. Oh, by the way, we have 2 gigawatts in our pipeline. It's like, what?
They were on top of they were at we were at the BTBT party at the Bitcoin conference, I think. And dude, the BitDeer team were there. Like I remember seeing that. I didn't go talk to them, unfortunately. It looked like they were having some kind of internal meeting when I saw them. I guess they were just eating food together or something like that, but completely missed them. And Gabriel told me, he's like, oh yeah, like, do you remember that group that was sitting over there? And I was like, I remember them. He was like, that was the BitDeer team. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. You cannot be serious right now. So, by the way, Matt or Arceris, any last thoughts on that? Because I was going to jump into BTBT a little bit.
No, I mean, controlling your cost is what every business is supposed to do. And if you're BitDeer, it's wise, I think, to be able to vertically integrate the ability to create new chips and new designs, because that helps you reliably take receipt of new miners and turn them on when you expect to, because you're buying them from yourself, because you're the fab over across the street. That's good to know.
Yeah, and the owner of BitDeer, or the CEO there, is was a co-founder in Bitmain as well. So he has that experience of building out ASICs. That's why.
Yeah. Smart.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, speaking of the BTBT party, that's one that, oh, wait, let me double check that he's not in the waiting room. Okay. Almost had a heart attack there. Sometimes I'll go full screen and I forget to like check the comments or the private chat, or like sometimes, you know, a lay person will jump in here and it'll just be hovering and it'll be like, let them in. And I've had someone sitting there for like 15 minutes before, so I have some PTSD from that. But he's brought up BTBT a lot. He's super bullish on it. He's definitely an AI HPC guy as well. People talking about BTBT shifting entirely. I've heard pretty staunch opinion, or I don't know if staunch is the right word, pretty divisive opinions on them pretty much all year. I've got a lot of people who are like super bulls on them. They love everything they do. And then I've got other sides saying they're totally just overhyped. So what are our thoughts on this? Maybe we can go to Arceris first and then maybe macro or something.
I actually don't know a ton about BTBT. I've heard about them. But I've not really looked into it much myself. Sorry.
Same. That's why I'm asking you guys.
So
I think they're like 13th by market cap I have a
Yeah.
spreadsheet that's tracking them, so I don't blame anyone on this call for not digesting all of their information.
aren't they the company that also has some ETH?
Yeah, they do. So
Yeah,
they're a smaller Bitcoin miner, but they have a lot of potential with HPC AI. They historically have been asset light, meaning they didn't own any of their facilities for Bitcoin mining. They had older generation Bitcoin miners as well. Recently, they got a letter of termination, basically, that their hosting partners are going to be renewing their contract with them at the end of this year and early next year. So they got 2 point some exahash that they have to either sell or move. And it looks like they're going to be actually selling that and getting some newer generation miners that they still say that they want to get to 3 exahash. So that's still pretty good there with newer generation miners. I was actually thinking that they were going to be kind of pivoting completely into HPC AI going forward, because, you know, they didn't buy any new machines this year. They weren't looking to buy anything else going forward. But then this came out and it's like, okay, they're at least going to try to stay at least 3 exahash, maybe get to 6 exahash sometime next year. So that's good there. They have been, or at least they bought a facility recently in Canada, right? If you guys recall, I can't remember the company name that they bought, but that was a tier 3 data center provider. So they have those. They have also a few more megawatts. I wouldn't say it's a lot of megawatts, but more megawatts that they can put in close to metropolitan areas for HPCI customers. They do have an HPC customer there right now that they've had for about a year now. It's generating close to, I think, like 95 million in revenue for them a year. Pretty good profit margins as well on that. And they're working with other customers as well. I think Boosteroid is another one that they're working with potentially there, if I remember correctly. It's a small contract now, but it has the potential to possibly get to like 700 million a year if they grow it to that potential there. Or over the term, the contract term might be like 700 million or something like that. So they do have a lot of potential. It's just they haven't been really valued on their Bitcoin mining because, well, it has been great, but they're a good operator nonetheless. They don't own any infrastructure, but that's changing there. So they should be doing much better going forward, I would think, especially if they get more customers for the HPCI business as well.
For you guys who are trying to like be investing in this coming cycle, or maybe you're already invested in, what are some of the indicators, I guess, you guys are going to be using to know whether or not you're fully toppy, if you're like, this is time to get out of here, or you're thinking, hey, like that announcement's not going to be good, I need to get out of here, I'm not liking what direction they're going, things like that. I'm curious what this cycle will bring that you guys are looking forward to. I feel like game theory is going to play out pretty extraordinarily this cycle around. Matt, you look like you are about to like explode. Let me throw it over to you.
No, but only because I do not believe in trying to time the market. I used to be an investment banker, and then I got better. And while I was trying to launch a hedge fund to, get into the game, I started learning about Bitcoin, and I was like, well, shit. A lot of this monetary premium is just going to flow out of this entire asset class. I won't be able to do anything about it, and it's going to go into this Bitcoin thing, and I don't have to hold it. Anyway, so that's when I got interested in it personally. But no, I don't believe in timing the market, and I think that if the market presents you an opportunity to pick up more Bitcoin for less price than it is right now, then go ahead. Absolutely, if you have the cash, take the advantage. But yeah, I wouldn't go out borrowing money to buy Bitcoin at this point or at any point, frankly. But that doesn't mean that I would, jump out of the market and try to buy it back later.
Yeah, I think Bitcoin is something that you want to hold on to for the next 5-10 years, if not longer, right? The miners, the proxies, you want to get in them, get out of them, and reevaluate where things go from there. And maybe we do have another bear cycle where you can buy them lower again, repeat. But we'll see. It might be a different cycle altogether. We might just have an extended cycle this time.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been interesting. I know obviously there's been volatility because we've seen 10K swings in a single day, but
Yeah.
it still feels to me, and maybe this is just because I've been around longer now, it feels so much less volatile to me than it did, like 2017. I feel like I was watching charts on like a minute by minute basis, which is not healthy. You shouldn't do that. Um, that's how you know you had way too much
Oh yeah.
writing. But that's where I was at that time. And yeah, I don't know. This time it just kind of feels like there's this relentless um just bid that's not retail at all, because like I still haven't got, I've had other people tell me like, yo, is this such and such just texted me, they're asking me about like what's going on with Bitcoin. I haven't got a single one of those yet, and we're at
Yeah.
like
Me neither.
107K right
Me neither.
now,
I've gotten none. Like quite literally none. I've gotten like
and
one or two people
everybody
reaching out,
knows
being
me,
like, "Hey, nice."
they're like that I'm the weird Bitcoiner friend, right? So like no nobody's said anything to me about it
Wow.
yet. So
Wow.
whereas like last time, at least when like Elon made the announcement for Tesla last time in the last bull run, I got some text messages like, "Yo, what's going on with this?" That kind of stuff. But
Mm.
I don't know. It feels while I would not take out debt to buy Bitcoin, I feel like I don't know. It just feels like there's, like I said, it's just a relentless, maybe institutional bid or something that's here right now, and it just every time we dip a little bit, it just goes right back up, and it's just kind of up and to the right. Which, um, you know, if you look at, I still think the at least the last time I checked it, the Google Trends searches for Bitcoin still hasn't like peaked out yet. It's not even
Yeah.
close. So that's like a big indicator for me personally as to like where we're at. And so I don't know. I still think we're like early part of the bull run right now. And I don't think we've seen anything yet.
Yeah.
I think last time, just in general, was kind of a muted top. In my opinion, I think the FTX had a lot to do with that. Some people would fade that idea, but I mean, when everything kind of finished up there, there was no Bitcoin at all. That they had a bunch of IOUs that they owed people, and they had never bought any Bitcoin
Wow.
themselves. And then the whole thing blew up. And I think actually last cycle we should have probably broken six figures, but we didn't. And I think FTX had a lot to do with it. So I don't
Mm.
know. I think this one could surprise people to the upside. That's
Mhm.
just kind of how I'm feeling right now. I could
Interesting.
be wrong, and I don't
Yeah.
trade, so I'm not really worried about it. But that's just kind of my gut, what it's telling me. As the third cycle, it just feels a little different. It doesn't feel as volatile. It just feels like we're just kind of floating up and to the right now. So.
Arceris, you
Yeah.
have any thoughts?
Yeah. I think it was one of the things that I thought was a little interesting, Thanksgiving was November 28th, which was Thursday. Yeah, Thursday the 28th. And you look at this chart, and I'm thinking, all these people traveling back to their families. Bitcoin's trading in the mid 90s. It's been there for a little while, maybe a week or so. Nothing happens. Like 28th, 29th, 30th. You get to Wednesday the 4th, and that's the first day we go over 100. And there's just a big spike. And I'm wondering if that was just the delay in the conversations that had over Thanksgiving. People had to sell some things, move things around, and that's when things hit. But then we hit up 104, and then we fall back down. Compared to some other times, this is a very relaxed run up, and I
Yeah.
think that's good long term. But yeah, it's just a very 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 plodding up the hill kind of thing.
But we're seeing liquidity already enter NFT land, which I'm all game for. Like, I love just throwing my money at nonsense. It's amazing. It's hilarious. But like literally there is like enormous amount of like we're seeing crazy numbers on these NFTs. So I'm like, okay, so we're starting to see real movements of like this money, people pulling for money from here, pulling it, moving over here. I feel like a lot of English, like a lot of people took their Solana profits, moved it over into other alts because Bitcoin didn't really get wrecked that much. Alts had a little bit of a run, but nothing crazy. But now we're seeing a resurgence of NFTs. And I'm like, okay, so now I'm trying to put together where Bitcoin mining fits in this little cycle. Last time I was around, I came in from the DJM world, slowly found my way towards Bitcoin, but I started off like way on the outskirts. And so I was like, okay, it's like Bitcoin pumps, and then Ethereum, then the alts, then the microcaps below them, then the NFTs. And then every time ETH pumps, the NFTs come down because the NFTs are tied to the value of ETH. And I never really had to worry with the Bitcoin mining stocks. I was just not part of the conversation. So where do y'all think it fits in the cycle of this liquidity cycle that we're going to keep seeing as this market continues to develop? And we're going to see, drawdowns of like 60%. I hope not 60%, but I've heard it's probably going to happen a few times on the way up, or it's going to correct for a few days, then come right back. And then one of those times will correct and never come back. So I'm just trying to figure out where it fits all in there.
Well, before MicroStrategy was MicroStrategy in the current Bitcoin Treasury version, I think the miners were one of the only beta proxies that you could touch in the equities market that correlated to Bitcoin and had something to do with it. So I do think that with the presence of MSTR as the higher volatility vehicle for Bitcoin exposure that's in the publicly facing markets, I think that's slightly disconnecting a little bit the price of Bitcoin to the price action of the miners. You also have to look at the strategy of the miners, right? Some of them are doing more of BTC accumulation strategy, Mara and Riot, et cetera. They're borrowing very cheap money and buying very valuable Bitcoins. And some of them are not barely keeping any Bitcoin at all in their treasury. And so the movement of the Bitcoin price action almost shouldn't change their market capitalization or enterprise value as much as the ones who are sitting on large sums of BTC relative to their market cap. So since they're all playing such a different game with different mixes of strategies and different holdings of Bitcoin, and now MicroStrategy's out there as like a black hole, which has really changed the gravity of the rest of the market, I think that, it's going to move a little bit differently than it has in previous cycles. And then to your last point, just to get it in here, why is this cycle different, or why does it feel different? I just mentioned MicroStrategy, and they're just one buyer who's in the market constantly just bidding up multiples of how many Bitcoin are issued or easily available. But then you've got the ETFs who are BlackRock and Vanguard that are gobbling up just as many Bitcoin, practically speaking, on the same rate, it feels like, as MicroStrategy. And then, so at the end of the day, we just have more sources of demand than we've had before, and they're gobbling down at bigger bites than before. And the $100,000 unit bias thing, I think it almost helps us to be over this number now. I feel like institutions are going to start looking at us differently than when we were a $55,000 and a $65,000 per coin asset.
Yeah, and you think I know that the math is obvious why this is the case, but at $100,000 of Bitcoin, you get $1,000 sats per dollar, but you get to we're below 950 sats per dollar right now, and that's only 106, and it's because it's a doubling, so we'll hit 500 sats per dollar at 200,000. So obviously that's why, but the acceleration there seems a bit interesting. Your dollar's eroding faster than you even think at that. And I think one of the things you said about the I think Cade, you mentioned the big drawdowns that we might see. I don't know. I think that when starting first quarter next year, if we get a U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve, we have a couple of other companies that put it on their balance sheet. We have maybe 3, 4, 5, 10 U.S. states that pass these strategic reserves, and maybe another couple other countries. You have that kind of massive institutional buying power, especially if it's programmatic buys. If we have a pullback, is that going to trigger? Are these pullbacks going to be blunted? Are we basically entering the era of the opposite of FTX? FTX kind of cut the heart out of the top. Are we going to have these institutional buys cut the heart out of the crashes?
Yeah, historically we had, if you look back, in Bitcoin, we had, what was it, probably like 5 to 7 corrections on the way up of 20-30%. We only had one, like maybe one so far that kind of went down about 20% or something. Back in, what was it, October, I think it went down, right? So that was only one. And yeah, with all the adoption that we're seeing here from, like you just said, nation states, countries, states, pension funds, ETFs, all that stuff is buying into it. Could it be similar to what we saw with gold when gold got ETFs, right? Gold went on a run for a number of years before it stabilized. Could we see the same thing with Bitcoin? Possibly. I don't know. We'll find out after the cycle, after next year. I think if next year we don't drop, then yeah, we're definitely in a different cycle.
Macro, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's kind of what I was talking about with it feeling different, right? Is it felt, even the bull market in 2020 felt more retail driven to me than this does so far. And what I mean by that is just that volatility. Yes, it's volatile, but it just doesn't feel as volatile. And it just feels like every time it dips, even the 10K dip the other day where it went from basically 100 to 90, right? Well, right away, you're like right back pushing up 100 again, and then right back above like it was nothing. And now 107 today. It's just like, it just feels more relentless. It feels more controlled, but yeah, I don't know. I just feel like it's just going to surprise people. Like we could just see this relentless march just kind of continue without any like retail makes those blow off tops happen a lot of the time, like people trading on, stupid amounts of leverage and then they get wiped out. And so if you don't have that kind of stuff happening nearly as much, and most of the bid is coming from ETF buying, institutional buying, whatever, MicroStrategy, just, the black hole of money that they seem to be able to get access to, like that just kind of, it just keeps, it's like a just up, 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 and there's just no crazy leverage to get wiped out. So you probably don't see it go insane, but it, I think it was maybe Sebastian or Arceris, one of you guys just said, maybe the top kind of, or the bottom just becomes muted because there's just so much constant buy pressure coming in. And that's kind of like the S&P 500, how that's been for forever, right? Because you're basically witnessing the monetization of something. You're witnessing a monetary premium just continuously being added. And so what you're really seeing there is actually the debasement of the currency you're measuring it in. And because of that, I think you could just be surprised and just see Bitcoin just relentlessly march up, which is what you're really watching. I think Arceris made this point earlier, is you're really watching the just relentless decline in the purchasing power of the dollar in real terms, right? And that's just what, it's funny to me because whenever somebody says, "Oh yeah, like you gotta sell that," and like, do what with it? Like what am I gonna sell it for? Like no, you don't get it. This is the exit. And I think once you internalize that, then the price action makes a lot more sense. So that's just kind of where I'm at with everything mentally, which makes it honestly a lot easier to watch it go from 100 to 90 and just not even feel anything, like literally be emotionless about it. Like, oh, interesting. It went down 10K, whatever. Now we're back at 107, right? Like, and I think the sooner you can get there, the better you are. And then, as always, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to say, I think the NFT stuff, the alt stuff is just a waste of time and mental energy personally. Bitcoin is the signal, everything else is noise.
Yeah, I will not argue with you there. I still end up messing in the trenches somehow, but I definitely will not argue there. Bitcoin is the end game, it is the exit.
How many cycles? Is this your first cycle?
This is my second cycle, so that's probably why.
Yeah.
But interesting is it's also the first cycle that I understood Bitcoin. Last cycle I wasn't thinking I thought it was just the top altcoin. I didn't really understand why people bought it. It was only this cycle when I saw curious billionaires buying enormous amounts of Bitcoin, and I was like, what the hell's happening? Like why wouldn't they just buy ETH or Solana or something with higher upside, was my thought. And then I was like, there must be something I'm missing about Bitcoin that I have to be skipping over something. And so the Bitcoin spaces over the last year pretty much gave me the foundation to be like, oh, this is why these people have been parading Bitcoin only for so long. Like I never really understood it. So that's very helpful for me. And I wonder what percentage of people this cycle maybe got that educational, smack in the head where they finally figured out Bitcoin. Maybe that's why they're unfazed. It's also, interestingly enough, helps my conviction in non-Bitcoin bags, in my altcoin plays and random other bets. I just don't mind like the hold because I'm not that particularly worried about, I don't mind holding it, I guess, because I have faith in Bitcoin. And so I'm not so worried about everything falling apart. So I'm like, well, as long as Bitcoin, Bitcoin is going to be fine. And so all you guys have to do is not just like totally FTX yourself, and you'll, for the most part, be okay. You'll probably have your fun. You'll have, the 1 year of gains and then go back to Bitcoin only. But it is a lot of fun. So anyways, yeah, I wonder what you guys think, but do you think the education of Bitcoin is starting to get out there? Do you think people are starting to understand it? There's way more public discourse from very normal people with lots of money.
1,000%. Well, one, we've just gone through a 70s style inflationary event of the last few years. And so the public is more attuned to the whole concept of why are prices going up? What makes prices go up? Is there any place my money can go where it's going to be safe from this price go up, value of money go down paradox? So I think Bitcoin is better positioned now to benefit from the change in psychology. And then we've got several nodes that are repeating signal into the matrix in a good way. Like, I mean, I always think about this thought example, but think about MicroStrategy is knocking on probably 2,000 publicly traded companies' doors, and they're talking to all these executives about how they should be using Bitcoin as their treasury tool and as their cash flow management tool, and explaining how it's going to get positive returns. It's a monetizing asset. The monetary premium from real estate and bonds are going to fall apart and fall into Bitcoin, all these things, right? And these executives, some of them are getting it drilled in their head, and they're going home and talking to their personal banker and being like, how much Bitcoin do we own again? Oh, okay. You know what? No, I want 20% of my wealth in Bitcoin. Thanks. So there's so many of these conversations are having secondary and tertiary knock-on impacts. And then you've got leaders of the free world, and not just Bukele in El Salvador, but now Donald Trump here in America talking about Bitcoin's importance for the future. And I was a little bit worried that President Trump was going to think about Bitcoin as a danger to the dollar, and that was not going to be good because he's been talking king dollar for a very long time. But someone has adequately explained to him that there's a way for Bitcoin to actually strengthen the dollar. If the United States is the leader in Bitcoin, the network, the leader in Bitcoin holdings in terms of a sovereign basis, if we've got the strongest Bitcoin ecosystem happening in our country, and then we throw it on our balance sheet, and then we start playing with bonds that are denominated that have both Bitcoin and hard assets on them and other things like that, suddenly the dollar gets a lot stronger as a financial instrument because we as a country get a lot more solvent.
Yeah, that reminds me of like at some point I've been living in the city for a few years, so it didn't make sense to have a vehicle. So I just haven't had a vehicle the last few years. Recently moved out of the city, in between places, so I haven't snagged a vehicle yet. But I've been wanting to get a truck, and for some reason there's this allure to Chevy, just because it's like I don't know, you just have more of an allure to the American-made stuff. Like there's other, and even though I'm looking at oh my gosh, everyone tells me to get a Toyota Tundra, which is fine. I'm half Japanese. I'm all for Japan, but there's something about also having an American truck that gives it almost like an inherent value that I can't really explain. So you might be right exactly on point there. Like if Bitcoin is sexy, Bitcoin mining is sexy, and we're the hub of all of it, and we're the winners, we're the ones with all the big numbers, flaunting, we're like the big boys on the block, that probably would be good for the US law. I haven't really heard that argument as often.
Yeah, is that, Matt, basically the Luke Gromen thesis, right? Where you have, you need basically the hard assets to be here, and then at some point you need a repricing in the dollar, otherwise our fiscal situation is just untenable. So you pretty much have to reprice, and then you basically have two options. You either rebase to gold or you rebase to Bitcoin. And if you've got the Bitcoin here, then that puts you in an advantage position in comparison to the gold one, because China and Russia and a lot of other nations have a lot more gold comparative to where the US could be sitting with.
Yeah, that's right. BRICS has the edge over us when it comes to gold, but we have the edge when it comes to electrons and brain power. So why not try to change the game and say that gold is old money? Let's go with gold 2.0 and Bitcoin. And there's a lot of advantages to it, obviously. So I think the world is going to play along.
And you get more gold, right? You can't get any more Bitcoin. I mean, you can go to outer space. Musk can go up with a rocket, bring down an asteroid full of gold. I mean, what's that going to do to the reserve on that?
That's absolutely right. I mean, just like the water problem isn't a water problem. If you have a low enough cost of power to make desalination work, then you can clean up after yourself, because desalination does leave gross things behind too. So it's a two-part problem. The same thing goes with making gold. If we get kilowatt cost to be low enough, we can start nuking stuff that we can pile up sand and nuke it and make gold if we want to.
Well, I mean, you've got just if you're able to generate an unlimited amount of power, and you can desalinate to get fresh water to water your crops, give water to your people. One of those estimates is that just in seawater, there's something along the lines of 20 million tons of gold. So if you're already desalinating the water, why not just pull the gold salts out too? I mean, with enough energy, any physical good can be replicated to infinity and beyond. And Bitcoin is not one of those things. So.
Because it's an encrypted wall of energy, to paraphrase Saylor. So yeah.
And I do like Saylor's the suggestion he made last week about just having the U.S. dump their gold reserves to Bitcoin to as a speculative attack on the BRICS nations.
I love how
I
triggered
mean,
Peter Schiff
obviously, it's
got
not
with
going to
that.
happen, but it's hilarious.
Yeah, I thought that was funny too. I really liked that.
You know, the other day I heard about I forget who brought up FTX, but I don't really understand the argument. I feel like the only reason they're drawing this is because they're such a leader in the space. But a lot of people have said MicroStrategy are the FTX of this cycle, that something's going to happen. MicroStrategy is going to get fudded to the ground, and Bitcoin is just going to get wrecked. Is the scare that people had, and I guess I get it. I would have to see what the thing that MicroStrategy would do that would cause such a cascade. They'd have to be lying about something.
For
you know?
security reasons, he's never published where all of his wallets are. But so I understand some people might be claiming he's raising this money, but not putting it where he claims he is. But that would be
bad. That would be very bad. Actually,
that could. Let's assume that's even a remote possibility. I don't think it's even there, but that's just flat out fraud. So I mean,
right.
but that was what FTX was doing. I've heard other people compare MicroStrategy to the Hunt brothers, but that is not even a remotely apt comparison either. The Hunt brothers were using all of these leveraged assets to corner the silver market, but the difference is they I think at their height they had something like 25% of the silver market, or maybe even 35 or 40%, and they collapsed. But MicroStrategy, they have 2%. Like, it's not even like we're not even anywhere near the same scale that the Hunt brothers achieved. And of course, the silver, if the price of silver were to 10x, I got some spoons I can melt.
I think one thing for me on this, it's just, I feel like the community in general has it's two aspects. One is the community has a bit of PTSD because you have Mt. Gox, you have FTX, there's just been so many things. There's a million others. Like BitConnect,
Celsius.
Man, they're all right. Stop. Like, all right, that's enough. That's plenty.
You see what I'm saying, right? So like, there's been so many things that everybody's just like, oh, okay, well, what's the one for this cycle? There's got to be one, right? But I think the difference is, a lot of that stuff. This is like, I feel like I can already see the DMs now, but whatever, I'm going to say it. It's a little different when you get to like institutional grade stuff versus like, this is, everything else was kind of gray market, black market type things going on. People were figuring the technology out. It was like businesses run or started by people who have not run or started businesses before. Like, there's just so many things. Basically, like, just the risk in general for all of those earlier platforms, let's just call them, or organizations, Ponzi schemes, the various things that were built on top of Bitcoin and within the Bitcoin community, I think leads to, I would just call it PTSD, community-wide PTSD. That, and people in the Bitcoin community generally are predisposed to thinking adversarially, right? And so if you're thinking adversarially and you're assuming that basically trust nobody, and that's just the general mindset of the community, then you're also going to see anytime somebody comes in and has the spotlight at that time, there's going to be a certain portion of the community that's just going to be going, oh yeah, how long until they get wrecked? Let's start our countdowns now, right? And so I think it's kind of a combo of those two things is why you hear people saying that MicroStrategy has to be the FTX of this cycle because, well, they're the biggest one and it's the most public and it's out in front of everybody. So therefore, something's got to be wrong there, right? And I don't think something has to be wrong there. Personally, it could
the thing
be,
that's
but
wrong is the fiat system, and
yeah,
just bridged it perfectly.
Yeah, and it's entirely possible that we've had 4 cycles of this. Maybe these things have worked themselves out. I mean, sure, there's going to be something that breaks, but is it going to be FTX level? Is it going to be Mt. Gox level?
No.
In the mining setup, is it going to be core scientific level? No, I think that people have gotten smarter about it, and maybe we won't see a collapse or a long-term capital management level failure in this space this time.
Yeah, short of Coinbase saying we lost our own keys, whoops, I guess the game's over. I can't really imagine something that absolutely takes us down. Like Gox was such a large percentage of the Bitcoin market in 2014. And nowadays, there isn't really one exchange, again, besides Coinbase, where all of our electrons hang out. That means something to us.
Yeah, and even I can't. I'm not speaking from absolute knowledge here, but Coinbase is likely smart enough to have at least learned from the Celsius situation and created segregated vehicles so that their custody, their professional custody, is bankruptcy remote from their exchange. So if their exchange goes underwater, the professional custody is not affected.
In 2013, our family office was pitched among several others in a room, and Coinbase came in and they explained their part of their systems and protocols. And someone asked about things like that. They didn't get into the weeds, but they talked about like physically printing pieces of paper that had keys on them and having them auto printed and retained in a room with cameras on it. And then basically the idea being that like, there is no such thing as oopsies, we lost our coins, because there's an intermediate backup copy stored at that number address. So they always have ways to undo and unring bells. And you can imagine what they've developed since then, considering how much additional value is inside their vaults now. I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even talking about those physical layers. I was discussing the bankruptcy remote point is, if the exchange goes down, can the Chapter 11 trustee and the judge reach through the exchange and pull the assets out of the custody, which is what happened in Celsius, by the way. So, because the Celsius, they had attempted to break these things up into legal entities, but they didn't do it properly. And so, even people with custody, now granted, I think they were also raiding each other. So if Coinbase has, Coinbase custody, and they have 100% of the Bitcoin they say they do, okay, I'm just saying let's say they do, but if the exchange doesn't, and the exchange goes down, if those things are properly segregated legally, then the bankruptcy judge can't reach through to the custody and pull those coins to try to make these creditors whole like they did in Celsius. So there's physical security, there's operational security, and with respect to making sure that you can't lose it, but then there's also legal security to make sure that a rogue bankruptcy judge can't just raid you.
Well, plus those coins in custody are for third parties, right? It's not really theirs. They're holding it for somebody else. So it's not like they were using it for yield, right? Which was Celsius' fault right at that point, was yield, having bad books and nefarious CFO. But so.
Sure. I was going to say, so got a few minutes left. Was there any specific topics that you guys saw or any specific announcements that caught your eye for this week that have kind of given you insights into something you're looking for in the next few weeks? Or is there anything that's coming up in the next few weeks, I guess? So any large announcements that just happened or about to happen that you're paying attention to? Arceris?
Well, I'm looking forward to watching Jerry Powell squirm on the 18th, because they can't. If they raise rates, they screw themselves. If they leave them steady, they screw themselves. If they drop them, they screw themselves. So I'm just waiting to see that.
I think for me, not necessarily news so much as just an event that has been long talked about, especially by Saylor, but the changing of the accounting terms for how Bitcoin is accounted for on balance sheets of publicly traded companies is finally going through this December. So I think that can be potentially bigger than a lot of people really realize, because it's been indefinite intangible so far, which basically means you have to mark it down to the lowest price of the last fiscal year. So now you can actually just have it be the market price, I believe, when you do your books. So I think that could be huge, because it makes it so that Bitcoin is no longer toxic for publicly traded companies to hold as their treasury asset. So maybe it doesn't have a big impact immediately, but I think it's just another tailwind for the coming year. And I think it's something that should be talked about more. So
definitely good points there. Anyone else have any thoughts on that one? Otherwise,
I didn't understand that difference, but what a difference it makes. If it's 2025 and the low is like 117,000 and the high is 275,000, it absolutely stinks that from a CFO's perspective, you're forced to wear that 117 on your head. That is not value creative at all. You'd love to be Mr. 265.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that,
especially if it is, if you're cost averaging throughout the year, and your basis is above the low for the year, but you have to basically you're in profit, but you have to be in loss on your books. What the hell is that?
exactly. Yeah. And just think about how toxic that is, right? So like you literally have to go to your shareholders and be like, well, technically, by the accounting rules, we're down. We're at a loss this quarter. But oh yeah, by the way, Bitcoin went up 70% now. So like it looks to investors like you're doing a terrible job, but the reality is you're not. And so now that's just not a thing anymore. And I think that if you're the person who's the decision maker on whether or not you're going to allocate some of your company's treasury to Bitcoin, that's a huge barrier that was just removed, and it's just not talked about much yet. So I've heard Saylor mention it, and I think that it's just such a huge thing that now you can actually have maybe, Q1 of next year, you could see more announcements than maybe people are expecting, because that's no longer a thing that CFOs have to worry about anymore.
Yeah, and some of the public companies the public miners have already taken advantage of that this past year. They've been using that already. I don't think MicroStrategy has been using it, but the miners have been using it.
Yeah.
That's fine. All right, here's my last thing. We got to cut. We have 5 minutes left or so. So Trump making a Bitcoin reserve announcement very, very soon is like the announcement that he said, I'm going to do this. It's going to be like the first day. It's going to begin the thing. A lot of speculation on how much he'll actually appoint, if at all. Apparently he said it and he meant it, and that's what I'm hearing across the timeline. I'm not surprised that that's the most bullish take that we're seeing from the news outlets, because everyone's getting excited from it. But I'm just sitting here. I'm like, I feel like maybe I've just gotten used to the non-pro crypto stand, like the anti-crypto stance for the last few years. But I've just gotten so accustomed to kicking it down the road that I figured he'd probably say like 1 or 2 small things, but it'd probably be more like 6-7 months before we see anything in the direction of progress on this. But that was just my initial thoughts. Do you guys think he's going to really get it out here in the next month or so? We're going to see like a huge kickoff from the get-go?
No, go ahead, Sebastian.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's going to do that, right? He campaigned on it. He's going to try to keep to his word on his promises that he made to everybody. But we also had Cynthia Loomis also going with the bill there, right? Trying to get that through the Senate and House and get that to the president as well. So one way or another, I think we're going to get it. It's just whether or not he comes in on first day and goes, executive, decision here. We're making it a strategic reserve. We have 200,000 from the confiscated Bitcoin that they do have there. They could put that into it right away, and then just go, we're going to add another, however many billions of dollars we want to add into it.
Yeah. So I think go ahead.
I was going to say, isn't it easier for them to just say, okay, yeah, we're keeping what we've got already, versus isn't there another hurdle you have to get over to actually be able to allocate new capital towards Bitcoin? Isn't that a little harder to do? I don't know the exact way those rules work. It's not something I've looked closely into, but my understanding is at a base level, basically they can pretty easily say, yeah, we're keeping what we've got. That's the start of the strategic reserve, or stockpile, I think is what Trump's been saying, the strategic stockpile. So isn't it harder to actually add to that than it is to just say, this is our starting point? Because that you could announce pretty quickly, right?
He can definitely. So it's unclear what there's been back and forth in by some of us who are lawyers about whether or not he can do the purchasing by executive order. I tend to be that is to say that he cannot start allocating by executive order. But everyone agrees, he can by executive order say we are not selling what we have, and anything that we get we're going to keep. That's absolutely clear. He can do that because he can order them to not liquidate that asset unless Congress were to pass a law to force him to. But that's what the strategic reserve bill does, is it makes it clear that they are able to do things like reprice the gold and purchase through that mechanism. But I think for me, day one for him is not literally, January 20th, January 21st. It's really what happens in the first, say, 1 to 300 days, because he's got a massive amount of momentum behind him. He's got a lot of things that have to get done real quick. But the getting that and using that momentum is absolutely what he's going to do. They're going to try to hit on every single thing all at once to try to keep the detractors and the people who are eventually going to stall him out on their back foot as much as possible. And so strategic reserve, a bunch of pardons, J6, hopefully Ross, and getting all of his things, all of his cabinet nominated really quickly, things like that. It's just going to be a lightning round for that. So yeah, I think it's going to happen, and I think the momentum is there.
Definitely want to hear from the rest of the people.
Yeah, I think a day one EO was absolutely on the table. There's a lot of pressure. The Bitcoin contingent was an important element in getting, President Trump and the people that he was endorsing elected, I think. And so I believe that we'll see some initial, and not even lip service, some initial real movement. But Senator Loomis did talk about how this is just to get our feet in the water. A lot of these individual states, their bills, a lot of this national bill, it's just to put the treads down on the ground and make things ready for the trains to get built and start running on top of it. You start by just creating that legal framework, and then you start adding the ability for the government to get paid their taxes in Bitcoin and other things, and start opening up conduits for money for Bitcoin to flow around the U.S. government. And then next thing you know, we can start pointing our nationally controlled power generation assets at mining Satoshis, and R&D assets that we have. We can point that back into the American industries and create foundations and societies that would help kind of foster a Bitcoin community. And I think that that's really important part of our national security strategy, frankly, because I think he's going to try to strengthen the dollar by leveraging Bitcoin. And so a big part of that is controlling a lot of the vertical infrastructure between power all the way down to the electron level.
Definitely. Any other thoughts from the rest of the panel on this particular topic as we bring this conversation to a close? No final thoughts? Right on. Okay, real quick, speed round. If he doesn't announce it on day one, are you bearish short term? Is my question. And yeah, we'll do like 1-2 sentence takes, just real quick around the panel. I just want to curious some people's thoughts. So we'll start with macro. We'll just go around.
I'll just use a Lynn Alden quote, which is "Nothing stops this train." So it wouldn't make me bearish at all.
He took option 3, which was bullish no matter what happens. Sebastian, over to you.
Yeah, I'm the same as macro. Doesn't change a thing for me. I'm still bullish long term.
Arceris?
Yeah, long term bullish, but if he fumbles the ball on the strategic reserve, then buying opportunity.
Matt?
They can't unprint all that cash. So to Arceris's point, it's absolute buying opportunity.
Yeah, I was going to say that there's some things you can't undo, and no matter how bad he botches a speech trying to explain Bitcoin, I don't know if we can really stop this train no matter what, especially since the rest of his people around him love Bitcoin independent of what they think about Trump, which is nice, and they're all up in good spots in government. So I'm pretty excited to see what we end up seeing here for the next few years. I'm glad I'm able to talk with you guys and get the inside scoop on some of these things. So Macro, Sebastian, Arceris, Matt, thank you guys all for coming on. If you're watching the stream, by the way, they are all tagged up there in the title, so you can click follow on all of them super easily. Highly recommend if you like Bitcoin mining conversations and content and stuff. They're deeply ingrained in the conversation. Definitely shout out to the Mining Mafia. They're a group. If you're into the miners, try your best. It's the ultimate trophy if you can get into that mining group. There's tons of alpha in there, a lot of cool people. And if you're on YouTube watching, go to the description. You can find all their accounts as well to give them a follow. And we have spaces and streams every single day here at Wolf. We'll see all of you at a later time, probably tomorrow morning, hopefully. And we'll see you all later, everyone. Take care. And 3,